So hello everyone. Now that 2025 is here, I wanted to do kind of an end of the year recap for 2024 and a little bit of Q&A for some of the more common questions that we tend to get on the Facebook page or some of our other social media. So starting off with kind of the Q&A, the most common question that we always get is, well, how'd you guys get started doing these sorts of things? And that's always a really complicated question to answer because people know us from very different kind of perspectives. Some people, of course, know us with Begos Game Birds and our game bird operation. Some people know us from the dog world. Some people know us from just general hunting and fishing, from our conservation work, from our market gardening. So the question of how do you get started is kind of a, well, with what activity kind of question. But in general, I can say that doing these sorts of things, being involved in the outdoors and conservation and raising game birds and raising dogs has always been something that's been a part of my life. I remember very early on, my earliest memories are of me kind of taking two metal water pails, filling them up at the spigot outside of the house, putting them on either end of a broomstick and carrying them out to the dogs. When I was young, the first 8 years of my life, we owned a small piece of property, but the great thing about it is it played so much larger than it was. My understanding is that it was only about 3 acres, but we really only had neighbors on one side. To the back of the property and to the left side of the property, it was just kind of forest, and we never saw anybody. Nobody was over there. And so as a kid, I was really free to kind of wander around and explore. And again, I can't remember a time where we didn't have dogs. When I was younger, Dad ran German short hairs, and though they've always kind of had a special place in my heart because they're the dogs I kind of grew up with. I remember we had a large flight pen where we had pheasants and quail that we kind of used for our own purposes, mostly with training the dogs. But we also had some Canada geese. We had a few other pens where we raised birds. And so just kind of the general lifestyle has really always been there. And even kind of growing up, as I said, I lived in that location for the first 8 years of my life, and that was really all encompassing. I could watch, we always had the woodcock migration come through, and I remember watching the courtship dance. We had our garden, and I even remember that we had acorn squash that would come up every year on its own, right up next to the back of the house. We could go out and pick asparagus. We would go out and pick wild raspberries, and so that was kind of always, it was just a normal part of my childhood. It's just the way things were. I didn't know any other way. The same with the hunting and the fishing. It's just I grew up with it. Everybody in the family, all my uncles on both sides of the family, grandparents, that was just part of, our family activities. We hunted, we fished, we spent a lot of time outdoors. It was just who we were. So kind of after that, obviously things take the forefront of your life sometimes. Growing up after we moved away from the property, I didn't really have private access to a lot of those things, but we always owned dogs. Dad kind of switched over into English pointers. We had the occasional lab, Chesapeake Bay Retriever, what have you, but the dogs always remained a part of it. We continued to hunt and fish, obviously, and even going up through high school, where I was a year-round athlete with football and track, and then into college, same thing, year-round athlete. That lifestyle was always still a part of things that were important to me. I remember going on recruiting visits and finding the guy in the room with the John Deere hat and the flannel T-shirt and saying, "Hey, is there anywhere we can go hunting around here? Are there any good areas to go fishing around here?" So when we get done with practice on a Sunday, can we sneak out for a couple hours and maybe do a little bit of hunting or fishing or whatever the case might be. Really getting back into the birds kind of started. Dad bought the farm, 47 acres, I believe, when I was a sophomore in college. And so, obviously I spent most of the year away from home, but I would go back every winter for break, and we do a lot of hunting. In the summer, we would raise game birds again. And so through my 4 years of kind of undergraduate, that was kind of the way I stayed connected with everything is, I could go home, I could hunt, I could fish. We lived right across from the river. We, of course, had crops, and we raised game birds, again, for our own use. In 2007, I moved to Texas with my wife and attended grad school. We were there for about 8 years. And, that was kind of an interesting point for me. We mostly lived in apartments during that time. And that's when I bought my own dog for the first time. I bought a black lab named Bibi, and she was just a wonderful dog for me. She lived a very long life, and she was a great companion. She was a house dog the entire time, just a retrieving machine. And she kind of really taught me the basics of how do you train a dog from a puppy all the way up to a dog that can follow whistle commands and hand signals and all those things. And she was just a fantastic dog. As I said, we were in Texas for 8 years. And, one of the kind of the funny things about my time there is I really got involved in gardening very heavily during that time period. So I mentioned we did a lot of living in apartments, and I would have these very elaborate patio gardens that kind of everybody would talk about. And I'd go into, the office there at the apartments, and they talk about, "We just love your garden. We really enjoy every day coming in and looking at your garden, seeing what you're doing," and things like that. So again, you kind of always stay connected to it because it's just part of who we are. After I graduated really from my PhD program in 2015, I took a job up in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, in the Keweenaw. So we were way up there. And, that was a great time as well. I got my second lab at that time, Charlie, another black lab. There was so many new activities. I really became enamored with ice fishing at the time, learning how to grow in that northern climate. I learned about grafting, just a lot of stuff with greenhouses and how that all came together. And then in 2016, I moved back home to Ohio and back to around the farm. And that was when I really started to get more involved with the conservation work that Dad was doing and kind of the restoration ecology, native plantings, things like that. We also were really involved in market gardening at the time. We built a pretty elaborate raised bed garden. We had actually 32 raised beds, and they were either all 4x8 or 4x4 feet. And we would come up to the farmer's market every Tuesday and Saturday and sell. That's when I kind of got started with utilizing some of what we were growing a little bit more in depth as well. I made a very popular kind of squash bread, a lemon squash bread that was a big hit up at the farmer's market and things like that. And then things really took a big change a few years later. Dad got transferred to Indiana, Bedford, Indiana, for work. he sold the farm. Unfortunately, at that time, I had just purchased my own house. And so I wasn't really able to purchase the farm as much as I would have liked to. And so that was kind of a big change in direction as well. You went from, a large piece of property that you were really managing and doing as much as you could with, to where now, my home here, a lot of you have seen the pictures of my gardens and my pens and things like that, is just under half an acre. And so that was kind of a reset of looking at, well, how can I bring as much of kind of the urban farming aspect into it? How can I get back to, making sure I could still raise birds and do those sorts of things that I enjoyed? So really, I started off by fencing in the backyard here. I built my first flight pen, and that first year I had just 8 bobwhite quail in there and about a dozen pheasants, and was really looking at, how could I kind of get a selective breeding program for pheasants, to get pheasants that would lay and raise their own chicks. And, after doing that for a while, Dad retired and had a chance to move back. And we were kind of talking about what I was doing with the birds and things like that. And it just kind of exploded at that point. And before I knew it, we had so many raised garden beds and so many breeder pens for the birds. And we ended up building 3 really nice flight pens, 2 that were 25 by 25 and 1 that was 25 by 50. And it just seemed like we were growing just exponentially at that time. And honestly, if I had a chance to do it over again, I think I'd be a little bit more selective in how we grew at that time. It was one of those things where if we had an opportunity to go out and, buy a new bird or get some rare eggs, we pretty much always took it. And I remember us kind of writing down at one point, well, how many species or color mutations of birds did we have? And, we were really looking. We had 4 different types of wild turkeys. We had just about every color mutation of bobwhite quail you can think of, multiple color mutations of the ringneck pheasants. I had started to get into the ornamentals, and I had the Lady Amherst and the red goldens and the yellow goldens and the silvers. And, I know we had at least 36, I remember counting, different varieties, either species or color mutations of birds. And actually we continued to kind of grow after that. I got the prairie chickens, we got into the mountain quail. And so that kind of brings us up to where we're at now, and kind of looking at last year and kind of a review. A lot of really great things happened for us last year. Again, last year we really were able to put in those large flight pens to go with the one big flight pen we already had. And that's just been so nice to have a large space to put new birds in, to do a little bit more of kind of the commercial aspect of, raising quail or raising ringnecks and selling. We also, one of the big things that I do around here, and this kind of comes into one of the big struggles we have in this area, is we literally live in a place that used to be known as the Black Swamp, just a huge swampy area in Northwest Ohio. The street I live on is called Moss Street, and that's for good reason. It seems like it is always raining, always wet. And one of the things I did last year is I brought in several tons of stone and kind of laid that in the backyard around our breeding pen, so we could get in and out of the pens without walking in mud, and actually redid a lot of the pens to where the substrate in the pens is now stone too, which is nice, and it's keeping the birds nice and dry and healthy. And so that was a big accomplishment for last year, was really getting that going. I built a really nice octagon pen in the backyard, where I keep my trogopins now. And, a lot of you have seen those, that pictures of that pen on social media. And I know that's a pen that a lot of people really enjoy. Um, we've also, I think we have a really good plan going into next year where we're kind of reducing our numbers, both the species that we have here and then also the number of birds we carry. So really looking at making sure that we have really nice pens for them. One of the goals I had when we really started to grow was I wanted to make sure our birds had what I called, zoo quality life or better. That meant good, clean habitats, plenty of enrichment, minimal disease. And for the most part, I feel like we've done a great job with that. But there have been times where we've really had to shuffle birds around, make sure we had space for birds, really had to spend a lot of money on substrate to keep the pens cleaned. And I feel like now we're getting into a point where we're not completely there, but we're approaching where we want to be at in terms of number of birds in each of our pens, more breeding pairs and trios rather than maybe 6 to 8 birds in some of these pens. And don't get me wrong, our pens are sizable. Most of my pens here at the house are about 8 by 16. So, they're nice pens, but even so, I would say one of the easiest mistakes you can make when you're kind of getting into raising birds is overstocking. It is not hard to overstock your pens, and some of the recommendations that are out there are certainly not meant for those of us who are carrying birds year round. If you've got birds in your pens for a few months and then you're selling them off, great. But 15 square feet for a pheasant just really is not is really not adequate if you're trying to provide them with year-round habitat in their pens, making sure that the pens stay healthy and clean, especially as, again, with all the problems we have from all the constant rain, keeping the pens nice, preventing them from becoming muddy, preventing disease. And, we've been very fortunate, and I think very diligent as well. We've never had a major disease outbreak. We've had a bird here and there that's gotten sick, and we've been able to treat those birds. Of course, we lose birds every once in a while as well. But it's usually fairly obvious why. A bird will fly up and it'll fly into a post because it got spooked. A bird will have been picked on by the other birds and kind of socially isolated, and then we'll get an ice storm, and that bird was the one that just couldn't get warm enough because the other birds didn't want it in the covey, things of that nature. Some of the other kind of lessons learned is how important it is to minimize the stress for the birds, minimize the noise, make sure that they have privacy, keeping the predators away. A lot of people thought I was joking, kind of the first year I started trapping around here, because I caught 16 skunks, that first year. And for a while, I didn't think people believed me. And then I started actually taking photos, and, you'd see 3 or 4 days in a row, I'd catch a skunk. And I'm very happy to say that that's no longer the case. We no longer really struggle with predator problems around here. So that's been great. Going into next year, some really good things to be excited about. One of the biggest things is, of course, now that BB and Charlie have passed away, I got a new dog this year. So now I've got Bo, our little English cocker, and he's doing great so far. Really, really intelligent, athletic dog. That typical cocker stubbornness, So I'm looking forward to working more with him. He's definitely making me a better, more patient trainer, just because, again, he's so bright and so intelligent, but he's got that classic Cocker stubbornness where, it's not about what I want, it's about what he wants. So trying to make sure what he wants and what I want are the same thing is where we're working towards. Really excited about trying to get another big piece of property. We've been saving for quite a while, and I think this year it is very realistic for us. We're trying to get around 80 acres. Would love to get it back up in the UP. A place for us where we can get away, do a bit of our own hunting, do a lot of our native habitat management on a larger scale, and maybe even do a little bit of a shooting preserve. 80 acres is kind of the minimum amount of acreage in Michigan you need to run a shooting preserve, and certainly not something that we do on a large scale, but something that I think would be a lot of fun for us. To bring people in and let them kind of have those great experiences where you really get into the native habitat. Lots of nice sharptail hunting and turkey hunting up where we're looking, kind of in that Pickford area of the UP, if you're kind of more familiar with those areas up there, the Chippewa County, things of that nature. So we'll see what happens. We've got a lot of good projects that we've started. We're gaining a lot of ground with giant pumpkins. That's something we just started a couple of years ago, and that's going really well so far. I'm really excited about that. And I think this year could be a huge step for us and really getting some true giants. We've had a great year of winemaking. That's something started just a little while ago. Started off making farm wine with some of our grapes we go around here, and last year got into making watermelon wine, and just really excited to see what we get from the orchard and from the berry patch this year. This should be the first year we get some elderberries. This should be our first year for loganberries now, after they've been grown for about 3 years now. So really excited to see what we can do there and how just how that really develops. Hopefully we can keep the squirrels away a little bit better than we did this past year. They were a big problem this past year, got a lot of our peaches. So we'll see what we can do about that. And we kind of already are. We have our live traps out, and we've had some success with that. So we'll see how that goes. The deer coming into the yard, they seem to prefer the cherry trees for some reason. So we've had to make sure we've got deer repellent on the cherry trees pretty much year round to keep those around here. But yeah, just a lot of good momentum, a lot of things to be thankful for, a lot of things to be excited about. And, I'm really interested to see how this year goes. I think it's going to be a great year for us. Kind of checking my notes to see if there's anything I forgot. Let's see. I know Dad's got some of his projects going on with kind of renovating the trailer that we purchased and turning that into a hunting lodge. I think he's going to get a lot of great content with that. Now that we are in a good place with the pens and we've got our big flight pens, Dad and I have been working, 18 plus hour days during the summer, trying to get these pens straightened out and making sure all of our birds have space. And we've kind of taken a divide and conquer approach. So now that we're kind of in a better place where we should have more time available, I'm looking forward to doing more projects with him, because that's always fun, getting to work together instead of, again, kind of what we've had to do recently, which has been more divide and conquer to get all the work done around here. And so, yeah, we'll see how that goes. There's always time pressure on both of us. Again, a lot of you know that this is not my full-time job. My full-time job is a college professor. So occasionally you'll see people on social media refer to me as Dr. Jim or as the professor. That's where that comes from. I mentioned I spent a lot of time in school, and I actually am a psychology professor. I teach here in Defiance at the local college. And, there are great aspects to that as well, as far as it does give me a lot of time during the summer with a lot of free time where I'm not teaching as many classes and things like that. But certainly, there's always a lot going on. We always stay busy around here. But again, looking forward to this year, looking forward to the unexpected as well. There are always things that happen that are unexpected. Last year I had a buddy reach out to me who had some blue-eared pheasants for sale, and that was not something I was really looking for at the time. But he had had a phenomenal year with his blue ears, like we had a phenomenal year here with our trogopans and with our mountain quail. And we were able to make a deal, and now I've got blue ears, and I've really been enjoying them. They're great birds. I've not had the trouble with aggressiveness that other people have reported having. They're on stone, and so I'm not having problems with digging. And so they've been a really nice addition around here. And I know some of you have probably seen some of the photos of them. Kind of those unexpected things. And, I think a lot of us have a tendency to kind of look at where we're at, and, we realize that we've kind of changed over time and have unexpected things happen, but we kind of underestimate, kind of the random events that happen to us and how much of an impact that they can have on our lives and the decisions that we make and the directions that we take. And so I am kind of looking forward to, okay, what's going to happen next year that we don't know about yet, or we haven't planned, the random meeting with somebody from one of the conservation groups for a new project, the random friend that we meet through the bird business or through the dogs that maybe has us thinking different directions, things like that. So we'll see what happens. But in the meantime, looking forward to it. I hope everybody has a great year. If you have any questions or, any opinions, either pro or con about, some of the new directions we're taking about here, I'd love to hear your thoughts. So let me know. But until then, thanks. And I appreciate you taking the time to kind of learn more about what we're doing around here. So thank you.